Hello, and welcome to Somehow I Manage Product Teams. I'm your host, Naveen Pichandi, and I'm on a quest to have conversations with product leaders to uncover how each of them skillfully wield the art of managing people and products. I'm joined today by Kent Keirsey. Kent is the head of product at Universe Software, a holding company for Vertical Fintech Businesses, and is also the head of product for one of its subsidiaries, Goldie. Prior to Universe, Kent was the director of product at Greenlight Financial, building financial products for families and empowering parents to raise financially smart kids. Kent is also the founder and managing director of Atlanta's largest product community, ProductATL. We'll talk a little more about this community later in the episode. We spoke about hiring and what to look for in product talent, product strategy, and how product leaders are the guardians of the strategy, bridging an alignment across stakeholders, executives, and our own teams in early and mid-stage companies. I think the advice could generally be extrapolated to larger organizations as well. We went well over our planned recording time, which only means one thing. It was great. Let's get into it.
For management, press 5.
If you're really interested, it is called Somehow I Manage.
Hey, Kent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Great. Can you maybe start it off with your story and your journey to being a product leader?
Yeah, sure. I think like most people that I talk to who have found their way into product, most of my journey is stumbling into opportunities and falling into product. I was a big nerd growing up, loved computers. And when I went to college, was not getting a degree in computer science or MIS or anything related to technology. For some strange reason, I actually started in radio, television, film. I was on radio in college. And I started working at a software company doing, various roles like sales, support, QA. I mean, I was doing a little bit of everything. And I kind of just fell in love with shipping software to customers, literally, because we were actually sending CDs to customers with license keys. I was like, it was 2000, I guess 2009, 2010. And even though we were like in the midst of the internet revolution and everything is changing to SaaS, we were still sending out CDs to people. So I kind of like, I did it old school. And I also kind of rode the wave as we were building a SaaS solution there and kind of saw that maybe 2-decade evolution happen in a 2-year compressed window while I was working on it. Then I fell into consulting, again, stumbled into that opportunity, worked at Ernst & Young, known as EY, in their technology risk practice. And then, I got the phone call from a friend who had been working at that software company who said, hey, I just joined a startup. We're looking for, a project manager. Do you want to come over and talk about it? I said, yeah, this sounds good. I want to get back in the game. I want to ship some software to people. So I went and interviewed. And, after the interview, the CTO said, you kind of seem like a product manager. And I said, that sounds great. I don't know what that means, but I'm happy to do whatever you want. And, lo and behold, I love product, shipping products to people. This is my passion, and building good software is something I enjoy doing. So it was right. I am a product manager. I like it, but I think that's how most people fall into product is they just kind of like, oh, this is a thing. People do this. So from there, bounced around to a couple of places, stint in privacy software, and then moved over to hospitality SaaS at Gather, which was at the time one of the best places in Atlanta to work. From there, went to Greenlight and did fintech, financial technology for a few years. And now I'm working at Universe, the CEO who founded Gather. So he started Universe and him and I talked and I came back to work with him again.
That's great to hear. It's funny that you talk about CDs and codes because it almost went back reminiscing back in the days where I used to go look for crack codes and codes for a bunch of games.
Oh, yeah.
Back then EA games were sold in CDs and you just needed a code to get in. For a second, it almost took me back down the memory lane, but it was great to hear your story. It's funny because I like listening to the story, kind of why I always kick this off with that same question, because people who get into product management have such a circuitous route into getting to product management because it's this role where there isn't a college degree where you finish and you land in a product management role. I guess some MBAs do lead you up to product management, but it's one of those roles where you do a bunch of other stuff and you land in there. But it's also great to hear that, I guess for you, it was a function of you showing some of those acumen, of a product manager and someone finding out that you're good at this and you should be a product manager. I had that very same thing in folks who helped me out and landed me at kind of where I am right now. So that's
Yeah, I mean, people always ask for advice on how to break into product, and they're looking for some like secret way to apply from outside the role and outside the company, trying to get in. And one of my favorite kind of aha moments, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rich Mironov, storied product thought leader, but I was attending a workshop with him, and he basically went through this rubric of, as a hiring manager, what you're doing when you hire a PM onto your team is you are really trying to mitigate risk as much as possible. What is the chance that I hire this person and they mess everything up about this product, right? I'm giving this product to somebody. How do I mitigate that risk, right? And so like the absolute best you can do is hire someone who's like got 20 years of experience in the domain, has been shipping products in this domain forever. They've got the experience and the domain knowledge. You can hire a really good product manager who's never been in the domain. And you can go back down all the way to, I've never done product before, but I have a lot of domain experience, or somebody who's never done product and never worked at your company, never worked in your industry, who's trying to apply to a PM role. And like, who are you going to hire in all of those scenarios? Probably the one that mitigates the most risk. But if you think about like, I want to break into product, that person that you're looking at is probably the go-getter who's working adjacent to your product managers, who brings a lot of really good ideas and is like really hungry and would be a good product person, but isn't a product manager. You say, okay, well, rather than hiring someone off the street who I don't know, let's have you transition into this role as a product manager, test the waters. I know you're a character. I know you have integrity. I know you're going to care about our customers, even if you've never done product management before. You get that person in the role because you're mitigating a lot of risk that way, right? You don't have to worry about all of the people things that matter about someone. It's like, are they a hard worker? Do they care about their work? Do they care about the customer? You don't have to be a product manager to have those traits, right? But if you've got those, you probably know someone maybe is close to coachable and all of the other stuff that a product manager needs to know. So I don't know. That's the way that I look at it. And I've tried to like carry that forward in how I hire for teams.
That's a very good observation, actually, because I came into product management through an organic move internally within within VMware. And I would think most people that I know did that same route. Very few people actually jumped to a product manager role from a different role, from a different company. And that may be good advice overall. And I want to actually double click on that. I want to talk about ProductATL, where you do
Sure.
figure out ways to, get people to give them some experience to crack into product management. I want to talk about that a little bit later on too. But on this topic around hiring, bring up a very good point there. And I know, having been at Greenlight and running as a head of product for Universe, you probably go through some of the hiring decisions yourself, trying to figure out, how do you pick the right person to hire. How do you think about hiring in like early mid-stage companies, and what are some of the I guess signals that you look for hire?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite, it's kind of like, it's a really easy bar to fail. And 95% of the people that come into an interview with me don't do this. And so it's very easy to say like that person, if they have not looked at my product and formed their own opinion, and they're coming into interview for the role to manage it, they're gone. Like, if you're going to interview, let's say you're going to manage the playlists feature at Spotify, right? You're going in PM of playlists, and you're like, okay, that sounds like a cool idea. I like Spotify. You go into the interview and the hiring manager says, so, what is the thing that playlist is missing? What does it need to do? You're like, I don't know. I use Apple Music. You're going to get like laughed out of the interview, right? It's like, you've never looked at the product. You don't have an opinion. And, when I'm mentoring product managers, they ask the question was like, well, I go to the website and it says contact sales for a demo. And how am I supposed to get access to the product? How can I learn those things? They can't expect me to know what's going on. Right. And maybe that's true. Like, maybe people have a lower bar than me, and that's fine. But what I would expect a really hungry person who wants to get into product to do, I would expect them to go to my like FAQs, my support portal, all of the internal like training footage for customers where we go through the app and you can take notes about what the user experience is supposed to be and form your own opinion about who is this product for? What type of customer problems do they have? Because all of those materials are specifically framed to say, oh, you have this problem. Here's the video to watch to go solve it, right? So you can already be exposed to everything that a customer needs to know, at least in the perspective of the company. And I think arming yourself with that knowledge going into one of those interviews, it's basically like my floor. I expect you to do that work, at least like research, try to understand what's going on, because the types of questions I'm going to ask you in the interview are going to be more like second order questions. Where should this product go? If you were the product manager, where are you going to take it? Like, what do you think it needs to do? Who's it for? I don't expect someone to come in and learn that on the job. I think the kind of candidate that I'm trying to bring into those early mid-stage companies is one that's already thinking and been forming their own opinion. I don't care if it's the right opinion. They could be completely wrong, but I want them to have an opinion. I want them to have thought through it, and they may make some wrong assumptions, but that's part of the process is, exposing all of those faulty assumptions to the other people that you're working with so that you can get to a better answer. So anyways, I that's what I look for in those interviews, the willingness to be open about what they do know, what they don't know, trying to minimize the amount that they don't know, and really being kind of more collaborative and thinking through problems, how we arrive at solutions or potential hypothesis about what we can do. That's the type of interaction I'm looking for with a real product manager, someone who's curious and wants to solve all of the challenges that get thrown at them.
Got it. So if I were to summarize, it's mostly around curiosity. You taking the effort to learn about the company and some general product sense. Like, can you product and look at the problems of those users and come up with some solutions in that way? Do you have some templated standard questions that you typically go through and look for signals from those answers from there? Or how do you typically go about hiring them?
Yeah, I'll definitely ask them their perspective on the product. So that's just kind of like the first order question, and then I'll dig in and ask all the follow-on questions depending on what they say. If they say something to the effect of like, oh, well, I looked through the initial page of the website, but I kind of got the idea that this is a product for X. It's like, okay, that's not enough. That's not enough.
Yeah.
I want a product manager to be extremely dissatisfied with not knowing the answer, right? Like I want there to be like a deep discomfort with the unknown and trying as hard as you can to really just like rip up every possible shred of information and consume it so that you have the answers to those questions. The other thing that I like to do, is, there's very often, case studies. I try to make those case studies more interactive. There are two flavors of those. If I'm talking to someone who's a little bit more experienced, my bar is higher, obviously, and I'm asking questions really about this product, specifically, posing problems that maybe we're wrestling with internally or had previously debated. And, asking those kind of like strategic questions that will unveil whether they have thought through some of the foundational business viability levers, like how does this business operate? What's the business model? How is money made? What is the ecosystem of engagement and retention and things like that? I mean, I've mostly worked in subscription-based products. And so, if someone is interviewing for that type of role, they really need to understand the life cycle of a subscription, right? And if they're a more senior product manager and how that buying process works, how that user makes the decision every month to keep that subscription going. Why do they keep it going? What's going to keep them coming back and using the software? There's a little bit of a noble alignment of incentives with subscriptions, because the moment you stop delivering value on a monthly basis, that monthly subscription tends to go out the door, right? So anyways, trying to like uncover if they really have a grasp of the mechanics there. And so a case study for that type of hire is probably a little bit more, hey, given this product, one thing that we've been debating a lot is this type of, opportunity. Should we pursue it? What are the trade-offs? How would you assess the, fundamental risks associated with pursuing that opportunity? And basically I give them any answer that they ask a question to. If they ask, what does engineering say that's going to take us to build this? I'll throw out like, it's, 5 sprints, 10 weeks, whatever. Give them like data points for them to start plugging into some form of thought process of how do I make decisions about whether we should or should not do it? And all I'm trying to do is expose that thing. I'm just trying to get them to show me, how do they think through problems given certain sets of assumptions or ways that they believe the world works? How do they think through that problem I just gave them? Now, with a more junior product manager, what I'm looking for is that kind of like raw potential to think about a customer, their needs as a third person. Because I think very often, a lot of people that we meet are thinking about things from their perspective. Oh, no one would ever buy that because I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't have that problem. So therefore that product is worthless. Right. And it's like, well, no, obviously that product's for that customer and that customer has that problem. So, you're trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's the case study or the exercise that I do with a more junior product manager that I'm hiring for. What I typically do, and I borrowed this from Kevin Jones, who's a product leader in Atlanta. He asked this question of like, given a constrained space, like a small room, you can give them like, however many square feet you want, 300, 400 or whatever. You've been asked to design this room for a specific person. Got to figure out how you're going to fit all of the things. And I go up to a whiteboard and I draw the room. How are you going to decide what goes in the room given the limited space? It's a prioritization problem, right? They have to figure out, well, I can't fit both a, big flat screen TV and a refrigerator. They have to like do the trade-off thing of what fits in the limited space. But one of the most important questions I'm expecting them to ask at some point, hopefully it's like the first question, if not the first, maybe the second, is who is this room for? Right? Like who am I building this room for? Because a room for a 5-year-old is very different than a 75-year-old, right? And you're looking for that customer empathy, thinking about someone else's problems and what is going to be important, not for me, but for that person. What does that person prioritize? Do they watch TV? Is it a 75-year-old who's like, I hate TV. I never want to watch that thing. Well, I don't need a TV in a room for that person, right? And so you can kind of like do these question answer type exercises where even if they don't have domain knowledge, they've never been a product manager before, it's low pressure. They don't feel like they're doing some like business calculus question. It's just kind of like, hey, if you got a room, what do you put in it? Very basic, very simple. But the real skill that you're looking for is that ability to empathize with other people's problems.
That's great to hear. Such a small world when you think about it, because Kevin Jones, I think you know Kevin Jones through OneTrust when your time at OneTrust. Kevin Jones was the product leader that brought me into PN. And so
Wow.
very grateful for him, a fantastic human being. And I still keep in touch with him. He's trying to build a car right now. It's interesting.
That does not surprise
But yes, it's very much Kevin for you. But yeah, absolutely adore him.
Absolutely.
And that great examples that you brought up. Now, you mostly spoke about sort of how you go about the interview process, right? But while you were talking through that, there's one more question that I had in mind, which is around when you make the call to hire, which I think in an early mid-stage company itself is you're very conscious about your burn. You're very conscious about hiring, when you hire, who you hire. How do you make the call for whether you need someone who's experienced or someone who's more junior? And also, how do you make that call that you need to hire someone for this particular role versus, typically it's wild west, everybody just go get things done within a group of folks. So I'm curious sort of how you make that call and pull that trigger.
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was like one like answer where I could whip out. It's this is how you always do it. It's that easy, right? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to context. What is the problem that you're asking this person to solve? Is it extremely complex? Is there a lot of risk associated with it? So, fintech, for example, if you're putting this person in charge of something that has a lot of like regulatory risk, right? You're potentially like putting the company at risk and they've never done product before. That's a bad combo, right? Is I'm going to give you this big problem and you don't know anything about the space. You don't know how to do product first off, but you also don't even know to bring legal to the table that you're that junior. That is kind of like the balancing act is you're trying to make sure that you hire, obviously you can't hire senior people for every role. Like that's the resource constraint that you're dealing with is we obviously can't hire people with 10 years of experience, staff level product managers or principal product managers for every single problem that we have. So we're going to have to, at least at some point, look at maybe instead of that one very experienced person, getting two more junior people. And it's a lot of this is this very like it's difficult balance between short-term results and long-term growth of the team. You're investing in your team with every hire, and the person that you hire today will grow into a better product manager the next, right? And so you can kind of play this game where you're trying to figure out, do we hire junior talent early, train them up, put them in kind of like a co-PM situation with someone more senior so they can ramp and learn it before we know we're about to go invest in some like new domain or new product area that we're going to need this person to lead. And so that person's not getting a cold start into a new product, gotten a little time to ramp. So like you can kind of try to grow that person early and navigate through the challenge of, we don't have a person to do this thing that is, needs to ship next month. Right. And that's the thing that always happens in our early stage companies is we have an insanely tight deadline that just hit us yesterday, and everyone else is already at, and we need to go hire someone now. Well, if you're in that situation, almost invariably, you don't end up hiring that person in time. And someone else, one of your other product managers, is playing the, I now have 2 products game. And how do I do that? How do I balance? And their time becomes one that is primarily dominated by execution. They don't have time to do proper discovery. They don't have time to do proper thinking, or they're just like working themselves to death, trying to make it work. And sometimes there are times when you have to do that, right? There's going to be like crunch periods where you're kind of pitching in. But as a leader, if you're consistently asking the same person to go do 17 things, and this is the last time, I promise, but it never stops, I mean, you're kind of getting an F as a leader. You're not really thinking about that person's well-being. You're not thinking about how you're setting your own product up for success, because like that kind of product manager who's swamped all the time and doesn't have time to think, let alone breathe, they're not doing their best work. They're getting by. They're checking the boxes. They're attending the meetings. The tickets are like making it into Jira, maybe, right? Like half put together or something like that. But what is making it into those tickets hasn't been as well thought out or researched as it could have been if you had given that person the time to really think and really balance that discovery and delivery. A lot of this is challenging because it comes from higher up, right? So we're not the ones that are trying to do 17 things this year. It's our CEO who told us like that this is OKR number 55. And that's like an environment or a business that has other problems to address. And as a product leader, your biggest goal in that environment is getting everyone to the table that is involved in setting priorities and saying setting 17 priorities doesn't make sense. You cannot have this many number one important things, right? And that's the hard job of a product leader, is getting people to realize that and make some framework or some matrix, some stack ranked list where you force every executive to look at it and say, yeah, I guess that's right. That thing that I really love and I want is number 17 on this long list of things. And it probably is not going to happen this quarter, let alone this year. That's like the hard work. And you got to play that game as a leader so that you give your team the space to go work on those things. Now, given the fact that you do have at some point more problems to solve than you have PMs, that's when you have to go hire somebody, right? And you're kind of making the investment decision at that point of, how difficult is this problem? What type of domain experience do they need? What is the potential for this person to run at this for a little while, getting coached and growing into either the domain or growing as a product person and thinking through the problem? Like, can you give them that guidance?
There's actually a lot to unpack in there, and you pretty much cued me to ask this question, which is around product strategy. I think you definitely alluded to there's a lot of lower level problems, which are, managing workload, there's competing priorities, there's issues with execution. But you did allude to the fact that a lot of that could also be because of issues in setting the product strategy and priorities up top. How do you go about strategy definition, and what sort of rituals and documents and things like that you create to make execution much more smoother for your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think strategy it's like a nebulous term. People think they have a strategy and they don't. They say, our goal is to be this thing. And very often the the goal that they set is maybe some form of like broad vision statement or mission statement, but doesn't really have the sequential step of key activities that the business needs to accomplish, like objectives that can be sequenced on a timeline of we will do this, then this, then this to achieve this broader objective. And without that kind of like thought out approach to tackling problems, you're not really giving the team a strategy or giving them focus on what the most important next thing is. You're just kind of vaguely pointing in a direction of, I want to go make more money. And like, if you go into a room with someone who says our strategy this quarter is double revenue, it's like, okay, well, that's not a strategy. And it's kind of apparent pretty quickly in a team that doesn't know what the strategy is. You can go around the room and kind of like one by one ask the question, what's the most important thing and why? And nobody really knows. There's some deadline we have that this person cares about. This is what's on my queue to get done. But, they focusing more on the tactical, this is what I'm working on, rather than this is what we as a company believe is really our next step in the journey to becoming what we eventually hope to become. And I think it's that broader perspective of we as a team are working towards this goal. And this is how my work fits into that really is what you want from a strategy. What you want really is your individual contributors, when they're making a decision on their own, if they're looking at a problem and they're choosing between two choices, A and B, they are confident which one of those applies in this situation, given the strategy. They're not just saying someone else make this decision for me, right? If your engineers are basically like, hey, this could be this way or that way, and I don't care, just tell me what to do, because they don't really understand the strategy, right? Like if we make it very clear, this has to be like the simplest login process in the world in order for us to, execute on our strategy. This login process has to be super simple. If that engineer is making a trade-off decision between adding friction or removing friction at some, increased amount of effort or some other trade-off decision they're making, they know the right answer because we already have aligned on the strategy. Login has to be easy. Okay, well, I must make it easy as possible then. And everything that I can do, every like engineering flourish that I can apply to this situation to make this more simple, easier, and better for the customer, I am doing on my own without having to go ask my leaders, without having to ask my product manager. I'm part of the team and I get why we're doing this, right? That's what you want everybody to understand. And so your product team should not just be the decision makers that everyone's looking to, hey, do we do A or B? They should be the champions of strategy that consistently remind everyone what the strategy is and enable and empower the team to execute on their work without having to ask those questions, because they should know the answer, right? Because they know the strategy. That's really like the point where your product team is excelling at what they do. They're communicating that strategy in a way that is heard. Communicating is not just saying something, it is it being received by the other side. So you can't just say, well, I sent it in an email. It was in that Confluence document. I wrote up the strategy. It was 17 pages. Why didn't you read it? Like, well, no, that's not communicating. That's just writing a novel. Like communicating is making sure the other person got the message and that they continuously receive every new change, every pivot, every update. They're on the same team. They're on the same train you are, and you're all going in the same direction.
It's more like a reinforcing rubric of sorts for all your downstream decisions.
Yeah.
Pretty much look for, do we do this, do that, look at the strategy. Most times it's gray than black and white, but at least you can effectively look at one direction, which is much better than the other one in some way. Do you have any recommendations, or do you like creating these strategy documents in a certain template or a format that you typically prefer?
I mean, there are a lot of them, and it really, I think this is a question about what is the right tool for the team that you're communicating to, right? So, we're talking about this notion of communication. I think maybe it's like a helpful frame here. Not every team is going to receive the message using the same template, right? Like, let's say you've got this like go-to template of, I like to write up a 3-page Confluence document that is formatted like, and we'll say the Amazon approach, right? our Amazon PRFAQ. It's a press release before we've built anything, intended to get everyone to understand what it's going to sound like when we launch it. Like, what will people be saying about it? What will we be saying about it in our press releases? What will customers need to know about it? What are the frequently asked questions? And framing it that way might be useful for some teams. But then you're going to have other teams who are like, I'm never going to read that. And we don't work that way. Just tell me what's happening, right? And maybe for that team, a Loom video where you talk through it and they can feel maybe a bit more engaged and you show some visuals is a more appropriate like format for communication. As far as like ways of communicating that strategy and ways that you can do that, there are a few that I really like. Broadly, the bigger picture strategy. I've always really liked the blue ocean framework, which just to kind of describe it visually, it is a kind of a line graph, x-axis. Each segment is a different, distinct value dimension that you can compare yourself against competitors with. So, one of the ones from, I believe this is from the book, is the kind of like the theme of circuses and kind of like live entertainment in that arena.
Yeah, I think it was Cirque du Soleil was one of the example, and then
Right.
Southwest also, I believe. Phenomenal book. I do use Blue Ocean strategy for a lot of my thought process too. So
Yeah. And I mean, I think the reason why it's like, it's interesting is that also touches on differentiation, right? So it talks about Cirque du Soleil and it says, Cirque du Soleil, they focus on specific value dimensions that the average circus does not, right? They've got this like level of sophistication and glamour that the average circus does not. And they underinvest in maybe areas that the circus does, right? They know they're going to lose on this area because they're not focusing on the same customer. They're trying to serve a different ideal customer profile, right? They're focusing on someone else. And I think that's part of strategy, is really knowing like, who are you doing this for? And if your answer is everyone, again, you don't have a strategy, right? Like, we're going to serve everyone and we're double our revenue this quarter. It's like, okay, well, this gives us no direction at all. Instead, you want to say like, no, we're absolutely not focusing on these people. These are not our customers. This is not what we're focusing on. And these are areas that we don't want to prioritize investment in. Where we need to win is this. And for Cirque du Soleil, it's going to be the pizzazz, the glamour, the sophistication, the kind of mystique of it all. And that's something that, like, as a consumer, when I'm going to make a decision, I actually feel like I have options, right? Like, these do not feel like I'm just going for the lowest cost, commoditized circus experience. It's like, do I want to pay 4 times the price for this Cirque du Soleil ticket? Or do I want like the admission, the kind of orange raffle ticket looking thing for the local fair? And, people don't treat those as the same product. They're very different. They're very different experiences. And that's what you want your product to feel like in the market, right? You want your customer to be going around the imaginary internet marketplace, looking at different ways they could be solving their problems. Find yours and say like, I know this one's better for me. And this speaks to, product positioning. This speaks to the features that you prioritize. I mean, strategy is foundational and upstream of decisions across the entire company, right? Like, your marketing team is they need to know how to brand the business. If they're doing a big rebrand, they need to know, like, we're specifically trying to appeal to this segment of the industry more than this one, this like demographic. They need to know that when they're going through the hundreds of thousands of dollars rebrand exercise that's invariably going to happen as you scale. Your product marketing team needs to know which of these features is more important for them to adopt and what is going to get them across the trial threshold, what gets them to start the trial, what is important in lifecycle marketing to get them to activate early on, like what's going to get them to say, oh, this is why I'm paying for this. You got to really understand who you're serving and why it's important to achieve certain milestones for the business, so that all of those people who are doing their jobs can make those decisions correctly without having to do this like micromanaging design review or like team bi-weekly meeting where every decision of your individual contributors is questioned and corrected by leadership. If you're in this like cycle of every IC goes to a meeting and gets their decision changed, you're kind of like in this like cycle of insanity where you've got no strategy. People are coming and having every question or every decision question. And that's all because they don't really get why you're saying to do something else. They don't understand why not do it this way. If you got the strategy, those types of pins and internal logs die down because it's pretty clear.
Overall, great points there. I want to touch on one more thing there, which is when we think about top down, top could be you or top could be well above you too. So in early and middle stage companies, I know CEOs typically have a very high or strong opinion in how the product needs to be, what the product needs to do. And sometimes it would just be, we need to go build this thing, go build this thing. I'm curious, in your experience, have you had that? And how did you manage that, I guess? How did you put your foot down in some way to say, this is what we need to do, this is what we don't need to do, and here's why? And how did you handle that conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not an if type of question. I think most everyone who's been in this job probably has had that happen, right? It's like it's just kind of like a trial we must all through in order to earn our product leader status. My approach to handling those situations is to not argue. I think that's like a pretty ineffective strategy, is to be like the bullheaded, no, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. Very often that doesn't work. If you go into the power struggle with the CEO, you lose. That's just the name of the game. You don't want to play that one. But what you can do is you can step back and really just say, I want to understand why. I want to understand why this matters, because very often there are things you don't know. I think it can often feel, I certainly felt this way when I was like younger in my career, like the CEO is the one who's responsible for every decision. And if something's going wrong, it all ladders up to that person, right? And because you don't really have visibility into who does that person report to. They're not just like, this king of the kingdom, king or queen of the kingdom. You're making decisions from down on high. They report to the board, and the board is very often going to have a very specific set of expectations. There's things that have been committed to the board of how the business is going to perform. My strategy is always like, look, I get it. You say we need to do it. I'm not going to argue with that. Let's say we need to do it. I want to do it right. So I want to make sure that I understand why we're doing this. Okay. So walk me through this. And in this kind of questioning, it's a very Socratic. I'm trying to understand the rationale. I'm trying to understand who we're doing this for. Why are we doing it? What is the reason, that we believe this is the thing to do? And very often, just like in product work, there is some problem that this executive or the HIPPO, highest paid person's opinion, so something that this person thinks is a problem. They've maybe lost sleep over coming up with solutions for this, and they have found it on their own. And now they're handing that solution to the next person, us on the right. And what you want to understand is, don't give me the solution. I don't want the solution. I want to understand what problem caused you to lose sleep. Well, how did you come up with the solution? And maybe I can find a creative way to solve your problem more easily, not in 5 months, in 2 months, or in 2 weeks, right? Like maybe there's a way for us to get creative, share that problem with us, the product team, and let us understand why you want us to go do this thing, why it matters, how it's going to affect the business, all of these things that are maybe assumed in the just go do it. And if you can get all of that information, you've now got a lot more ammo to say like, well, I want to solve the problem. I'm not saying no to solving the problem. I'm saying, what if we tried this? Or what are our options? How can we explore the solution space rather than just locking in on the idea that you had in the bathroom before you came to work today? And that type of slowed down thinking, focusing on, I'm going to solve your problem. I'm not saying no to your problem. I'm saying, let's understand the problem first before we just go do something. And then I can take that as a product leader and I can take it to my team and we can actually solve the problem. Because even if we just went and did it, very often, this goes back to like strategy. If you don't understand why you're doing it, well, we added the button that you told us to go add. And they're going to say, but yeah, but the reason I wanted you to add it was for this. And it's like, well, you didn't tell us that, how could we have known? And so it's part of breaking it down, understanding problems, understanding the human emotion in it, which is, I'm afraid that if we don't solve this problem, it will all crumble in, allay those fears. That's kind of like how you can tease apart those, we've got to go do this, and really start seeing your stakeholders as your customers in some way. We still need to do this the right way. And for all those reasons, I think it's just important to maintain a singular focus on, this is why we do what we do. This is what's important right now. And how can I constantly bring the conversation back to, because it helps with just about everything.
There's so much nuance to also conveying that. And I think you brought that up and highlighted that too, because as part of this negotiation, how you bring about that negotiation is also very important. There's one, like his book that I think Never Split the Difference.
Oh yeah. Chris Voss.
Which was, yes, Chris Voss. And definitely took a lot of good tips from there, the late night DJ voice. I still don't know how to do it properly, but I guess you could practice it. Now, given the current macro conditions, I reckon a lot of people are either joining early stage startups or maybe even going to start one themselves. What advice would you give for someone, who's looking to go do these things based on your experience, working in an early and mid stage startup right now?
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is just generally good advice, is like, it's incredibly easy to feel super excited about your idea and whatever it is that you're going to go do, and think that you just need to like drop it all and go do it right away before you have any traction, before you have any real kind of indication that the thing you want to go do is going to work. The best thing that you can do is just make sure that you've got something that is indicative of meaningful momentum. A great example is, if you have an idea and you think that this problem needs to be solved and there are people out there willing to pay, very often what is a great MVP, like prove that people would pay for this or want it in the first place, is get the website up, get a sign up form going, and find some way to get that distributed, right? And distribution is like super important. Finding a way to get eyes on a project that you're working on, the name of the game. It's the only way that you really get that initial traction in the first place, is you find some way to get attention. If you can do that with a website that is very articulate about, this is the problem I think exists and we're going to solve it for you. Here's an idea of what the product could do for you and how it would work. This is what you see launch on Product Hunt like all the time. It's just these like wait lists / vaporware websites where it's see how many people have that problem, or like convinced to give you $1. If they just land and say, yep, that's my problem, buy. Like, if you can get that to happen, you really kind of have a better idea of whether the idea is going to take off or not, right? And, it's not to say that it's product market fit the first time someone buys your product, but it does give you some kind of signal like, hey, this actually exists. Let me talk to that person who bought it and see, why did they buy it? What is it that they thought they bought? And what was it that they really kind of gravitated to? And then you can start to develop that idea of, okay, this is the actual customer. If you give yourself more information, more data points to pursue, you'll have more ammo to go raise money in the first place. Because investors, if you walk in, you're like, I got the best idea, I'm going to build this product and people will come. They're going to be like, well, do you have any proof that that's going to work? Do you have any traction at all? Is there any revenue? Like all those things that get, you can get really excited and want to do something and not have anything to show for it, but an idea. If you can get past that point and actually get something substantial, we talk to these customers, we really understand the problem. We've actually demonstrated that we're able to somewhat solve the problem, or at least people are willing to pay us for solving the problem, even if we haven't quite figured out how we're going to do that yet. Like you've shown the problem's real and the market's there. That's what you really want before you jump ship to go start your fancy new startup.
As you find out if other people have this problem, you're also looking to ask the question, will you pay for it? Not just, will you like it or would you use it? And I think most people make honest decisions when you have to say you got to swipe or use a credit card for it. So that's actually really good advice.
Yep.
I want to switch gears a bit and talk about one of your passion projects. You are also the founder of Atlanta's largest product community, ProductATL. Can you tell us a little bit about it and also some ongoing activities that folks who are listening in from Atlanta can join and participate?
So founded Product ATL in, I want to say it's 2018. Started it with this problem that I wanted to solve for myself, which was where can I go to learn the cutting edge of what's happening? Like, what would I want to talk about right now? Probably like, how am I using GPT in my product, right? Like, that's the hot topic right now. Everyone wants to know, should I even do that? Is this hype or is this real? Can I really solve problems with it? What's the cost? How do I make it real? Like, that was what I was interested in learning. Now, obviously GPT was not a thing at the time, but if it were, that's what I would have wanted to go to an event for. And so the idea was like, let's just focus on solving that problem. And we started hosting events and the content was like interesting and people came to it and the community grew and it kind of grew around that notion of learning and growing. What it eventually, I think is kind of become is a place for people to share like questions, problems they're running into in product, get mentorship, and also just like help that next generation grow into product. Something that we've done a lot is kind of get involved in the local education system. So we've worked with the Georgia Tech Product Management Club, with Breeze EEBM program. Other groups that we've worked with include like UGA. Like we've got a couple students from UGA that joined one of our more recent events in Georgia State. Aside from helping like product managers to the clubs and the schools and have them go do talks and help expose the Atlanta community to like the opportunities that exist in product here in the city. The other thing that we've also done is kind of take those high potential people who are trying to get into product and give them an opportunity to learn all of the basics, learn all the things that would get them like really set up for success in their first internship or APM role. That's our foundations program. And that started late last year as a pilot and is continuing on this spring. And we took 10 students last year, then through a multi-week program that was led by one of our great product coaches in the city, Alex Sherman. He kind of ran through a curriculum that taught those students everything from product discovery to product delivery techniques, got them exposed to a lot of what the real problems are that product managers solve and the real things that they do on a day-to-day basis. And then we work to kind of connect them with opportunities, help them with their resumes, help them get in touch with people in the city that are maybe looking for an intern. Really kind of invested a lot in that direction as well. It's been fun to watch it evolve and become what it is. We're, I think, just over 1,200 people in the Slacks. It's free. We had two sponsors this year, RoadSync, local Atlanta fintech, and a consultancy that operates out of the Southeast named Method. Both of them sponsored the projects that we have going on this year and really helped make them successful. And the organization itself, I think, is like primed to continue doing good in the city and helping product managers grow, hopefully forever, but at least for the next few years.
A phenomenal thing that you're doing there, just because I think it ties about to what we spoke about originally, which is around getting into product management and how hard that is. There's never like an organic way for you to go from not done product management and you want to get into product management, do this and you can get in. What you're doing is essentially not just coaching them and kind of mentoring them to find out what are the basics of product management, how do you get there, but you're also creating a pipeline of folks that can get into other companies and you have connections and network where you can go possibly introduce them to a company within Atlanta, which I think is phenomenal, because that's a way for someone who's looking to go crack into product management, at least within Atlanta right now.
Yep.
I highly recommend for any of those who are listening who are not part of ProductATL to definitely join. And for product leaders who are listening, there's pipeline for folks to hire from and a bunch of junior product managers if you're looking for interns. That was awesome. And I have a few rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Oh, you know it.
Great. I guess my favorite question is, what's your most recent wow moment using a product?
Oh, I feel like this is just such a gimme question right now because, Chat GPT just hit and everyone's playing with it. I was playing around in React and kind of learning how to do some front end development project I was working on. And, Chat GPT was teaching me what all of the things were that I was trying to figure out. Like this is a ternary operator and this is what a ternary operator does. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what I needed. It's definitely a wow moment for me was playing around with that. I agree it's overhyped right now, but I still think it's useful. So that's my wow moment.
That's great. Yeah, it's definitely on its peak of its hype cycle right now,
Sure.
and we'll see when it comes back down to reality.
Yeah.
The last question, your favorite book that you've read recently and why you like it in one line?
Oh, one line, you got me, is my weakness. End of the world is just the beginning by Peter Zeihan. Why do I like it? I did not realize how much I didn't know about the world until I read that book. There are a lot of things where even if, this guy has a lot of strong opinions about what's going to happen, and maybe half of them will happen or less, but it was kind of eye-opening, all of the different intricacies of the geopolitical environment, our supply chains as a society, where things come from, the importance of climate change and how things are going to unfold. It was just a very kind of holistic view of how the world is interconnected, how globalization impacts us as everyday people. Found it extremely interesting since I knew maybe a third or less of what was in that book, just from a facts basis. So that was a good one. I try to, not just read the latest product thought leadership. So that one's my big.
This one's a good one. I've not heard this from anyone else. A great recommendation, because I typically hear, the recycled ones, everything in and around product management, product strategy.
Yep.
So this is a great one. I'll make sure to link it in their show notes too. This was awesome. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had too. Where can we find you on the internet, Ken?
Not Instagram or Facebook. I don't have those. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll share, fun news later this quarter of some things I'm working on. And it will, I assure you, be your next wow moment.
That's great. That's a great way to end that. I like that punchline. This has been so much fun. Thank you again so much for coming on and joining us today, and wishing you all the best on your project. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, Naveed. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Ken.